Smog continues to choke residents in New Delhi as air pollution in the Indian capital hits hazardous levels.
Every year, a public health emergency descends on India.
The percentage of population that's breathing air that does not meet our national air quality standards has increased from about 30% to over 50%. The bad air is not something that you become immune to. This is a toxin.
India has tried to address air pollution for decades. Yet in 2024, 8 out of 10 of the world's most polluted cities are in India.
The rate at which the problem of pollution is growing and the action that we are taking, that's not matching.
What keeps India from snuffing out its air pollution problem?
Citizens feel that it's only a short-term problem, not a long-term problem.
Everybody goes home, winter months are over, air pollution is forgotten.
The coming generations are going to be affected, which is like a very serious affair.
और मेरी बच्ची का नाम अनवी है, ये 4 महीने की है। एक्चुअली जब थोड़ा बीमार हुई थी तो मैं नियर बाई जो बेस्ट हमारे क्लिनिक के जो डॉक्टर थे उनके पास ले गया, तो वो कह रहे कि इनका ज़्यादा ही पसली वगैरह चल रहा है, धड़कन जकड़न सी हो रही है ज़्यादा, आपको हॉस्पिटल ले जाना पड़ेगा। तो हम लोग इमरजेंसी में हॉस्पिटल में लेके आए, तो उन्होंने डॉक्टर ने चेक वेक करके कहा कि आईसीयू में इनको एडमिट करना पड़ेगा।
Each year, from the months of October to January, India's capital, Delhi, sees a spike in patients with respiratory issues. In 2024, some hospitals saw a patient surge of 40 to 50%. The cause? An annual deterioration of the air quality.
इसका नाम हुमायरा है। इसे खांसी जुकाम हुआ था, बहुत सही, मतलब ये सांस लेना में से दिक्कत हो गई थी इसकी। बच्चे के जो अंदर के लंग्स होते हैं उनमें असर पड़ता है, इनकी सांस लेने में दिक्कत होती है। वो जो गंदी चीज़ें होती हैं, कीटाणु वगैरह, वो इनके शरीर में जमते हैं।
कि दिल्ली का पोल्यूशन में बहुत ही ज़्यादा बेकार है अदर स्टेट के अकॉर्डिंग देखा जाए तो। हम लोग थोड़े बड़े हैं, ज़्यादा बैक्टीरिया पे इफ़ेक्ट नहीं डाल पाता है, लेकिन जो छोटे बच्चे होते हैं, जैसे मेरी बच्ची 4 महीने की है, तो इनकी जो इम्यूनिटी सिस्टम जो होता है बहुत कम होता है, तो वो सीधा मतलब दिक्कत हो जाता है, फिर ये है।
Last November, Delhi's Air Quality Index, or AQI, reached 795. That's far above 100, the benchmark for when air becomes unhealthy. Some areas of the city recorded a reading of 1,185. Delhi became the world's most polluted city in history. But this problem isn't new. Since 2018, Delhi has had the dubious honour of being named the world's most polluted capital city 5 times. And pollution isn't just confined to Delhi. In 2024, 8 of the 10 most polluted cities in the world were in India.
Year on year, we have a severe growing problem of air pollution, and every year the Supreme Court makes sure that they come down heavy on the government folks, and the same story is repeated, where they come in, they produce some sort of a statement before the court, everybody goes home, winter months are over, air pollution is forgotten.
Yet if this is a recurring hazard, why hasn't India solved its air pollution problem? After all, poor air is a well-documented issue in India, one that the government has been trying to address for decades.
So air pollution and government's effort to deal with air pollution had started long time back, around the late 90s. That was a time when Delhi was asked to move all its polluting industry out of the city, and that was a time when the decision was taken to move the entire public transport and local commercial transport to natural gas. So these were the two critical strategies that were adopted at that point of time.
As early as 1974, the Central Pollution Control Board was set up to collate and disseminate data related to water pollution. It also coordinates the activities of the State Pollution Control Boards, which were established at the same time. Their mandate was expanded to the atmosphere when the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act was passed in 1981. Many policies were enacted in the years since to curb emissions and set air quality standards. More recently, the National Clean Air Programme was launched in 2019 to cut pollution from 131 cities across India. Then, in 2021, to resolve the issues of poor air quality in and around Delhi, the Commission for Air Quality Management, or CAQM, was established. Arvind Nautiyal works for the CAQM, overseeing all day-to-day functions and policies.
Talking holistically about air pollution issue in India, there is a lot of sensitivity. Firstly, it's about acknowledging that it is an issue. So that is the first part, which has been very appropriately done, and the entire mechanism, right from the central government to the state governments to the bodies, they're all well sensitized, they all understand the imperatives and the need to actually combat this issue. Mitigative measures have begun, but as we see and learning from experience across the world, it's a long journey.
However, despite these decades-long efforts, every winter, like clockwork, the noxious air returns. When monitors talk about poor air quality, they're usually concerned with particulate matter 2.5 or PM 2.5.
Now, when we talk about PM 2.5, we talk about the size. The particles which has a aerodynamic diameter less than 2.5 micron. The 60th cross section of your single hair is PM 2.5. Then it will get deposited. Smaller the particle, it can even reach to your lungs. They are the most lethal particles.
The World Health Organization's recommended standard for clean air sets PM 2.5 limits at 5 micrograms per cubic meter of air. India's standard allows 40 micrograms per cubic meter of air. But there's more to toxic air than size.
PM 2.5 particles can be black carbon, organic carbon, sulfate, carbonious particles, nitrate particles, minerals, and all.
Black carbon has been linked to respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, as well as cancer.
The moment the toxicity component comes into that, I think the world will evolve in a different kind of a paradigm impacts.
Air pollution is estimated to have killed 16 million people in India over the last decade.
Smaller particulate matter, less than 2.5 or even less than that 0.1, goes deep down into our lungs. It causes swelling of the lining of the alveoli, which is where gas exchange occurs. This swelling or the inflammation spills over into the circulation. If it goes to the heart, it causes swelling. It predisposes you to having a heart attack. So it's important to understand that the cause of air pollution is not that it kills directly, but it worsens the underlying condition, tilts the balance towards more severe disease and causes death. Air pollution currently is what I call a medical emergency, and it's a silent killer.
And yet, why Delhi and why winter? What causes the air quality to worsen in North India during the cold months?
Geography, climatology, and location plays a very, very important role in the air quality. All the coastal cities normally see a relatively better air quality, but like northern India, specifically Indo-Gangetic Plain region, which is more of a landlocked, like Delhi is a landlocked city which can swallow everything but can't vomit anything.
Northern India is fringed by the Himalayan range. In summer, the air near the ground is warm. The warm air, being less dense, rises and disperses pollutants. Heavier, cooler air rushes in to fill the space, creating wind that scatters the smog. During the winter, the air near the ground is cool and doesn't rise. Hence, there is little air movement and wind, and the pollutants stay near the ground. The Himalayas also acts as a barrier to prevent pollution from dissipating.
So all major cities across India grapple with air pollution throughout the year. It just becomes more prominent during certain months of the year, especially during the winters.
Last November, when the air pollution returned once again, emergency measures were put into place. Schools were closed. Traffic restrictions were enforced. Citizens were advised to stay indoors, and all construction activities for non-essential projects were halted. These measures are part of what is called a Graded Response Action Plan, or GRAP.
Certain measures, maybe they are restrictive, but if they help to control and combat this issue and lower the levels of emissions and air pollution during those winter months, it's not a long-term measure in any case.
It's the analogy between a disease and a symptom. If somebody is suffering from cancer and the symptom is that they get headaches and fever, so you give them paracetamol. That's what GRAP is. So GRAP is the paracetamol to the underlying cancer of air pollution in India. But does that mean that pollutants cease to exist in the atmosphere? No.
So, in the case of India, where are the pollutants coming from?
About like 14-15 months ago, I got a job in Delhi. It was a good offer and it provided me a push in my career. I was based in Chennai at the moment. But yeah, I took a call because the job really seemed attractive and a catch.
In November 2023, Madhu packed her belongings, left her family behind and moved to Delhi to work as a writer. But soon she realized things weren't quite right.
I love being outdoors and take walks, sitting in parks. And when I came here, it's something that slowly I had to just let go of. I didn't have an option to go out a lot without really coming back with a cold or a cough or a dizzy head. I think 2-3 months when my health just kept deteriorating is when I realized that it's probably not as worth it.
So 2 months ago, Madhu decided she'd had enough and quit her job.
I don't know which city I'm moving to next, but I've decided not to stay in Delhi because I don't want to give that cost anymore. I don't want to pay up with my health.
In 2019, Dahlberg, a global consulting firm, concluded that air pollution cost India $95 billion each year from reduced productivity, work absences, and premature death. This adds up to 3% of the country's GDP. And while Delhi may be the worst hit, other major cities are also susceptible to periods of pollution.
It is an India problem. Often when you hear people in Delhi NCR saying, oh, it's so polluted that I want to go and live somewhere else. I mean, don't be in a fool's world. Because pollution and the health risk is now quite uniformly spread.
Where does the air pollution come from? According to the Centre for Science and Environment, more than half of the pollution in Delhi comes from the areas surrounding the capital. About 1/6 comes from biomass or crop burning. Within Delhi, there are many sources of pollution, including waste burning, industrial activity, power generation, construction and road dust, and the biggest contributor, vehicular emissions. And yet, approximately 1,800 new cars are added to the roads of Delhi each day. For the middle class, having your own car is a sign of having made it.
Cars are part of aspiration, but how much the car you are going to use depends on the convenience of all other modes. If you look at the way we are designing our roads today, it is for the convenience of the movement of the car. And you're making flyovers, widening road that are impossible to cross. So the road design is telling us continuously that we are designing the city for you to drive a car, but not to walk, not to cycle and use a public transport. It's just not the number of vehicles that the Delhi alone is registering. On a daily basis, more than 1.1 million vehicles enter from the surrounding region. Now, is this sustainable? Not at all.
Delhi and India at large have taken steps to cut emissions by encouraging the use of clean fuels and offering incentives for electric vehicles. Emission standards for new vehicles have been upgraded to align with EU benchmarks. The problem, however, is that of the 6.5 million registered vehicles in Delhi, many are old.
Sheer numbers of older vehicles is actually the issue. While there is a Supreme Court ruling that no diesel vehicle more than 10-year-old or petrol vehicle more than 15-year-old can ply in Delhi NCR, but still we find that this enforcement has not been up to the levels, and large numbers of such overaged vehicles are still found plying in the roads across Delhi NCR.
Meanwhile, Delhi has become more crowded. It is now the 44th most congested city in the world. Cars are on the roads for longer. An idling car in traffic can produce about 4 pounds of carbon dioxide per hour. Then there is the issue of construction dust. Delhi is one of India's busiest construction hubs. An estimated 385,000 homes were completed in 2022.
Construction dust is poorly managed all year round. I think the primary reason is that we are a developing country that has internalized a message that it has to be development first and environment later.
During months with poorest air quality, sprinklers are employed to settle the construction dust by trapping them with water. However, much of the construction dust comprises larger particles of PM10.
2.5 is lethal, 10 is dust, mostly dust. If you look at the incentives that are given to the state governments and the state pollution control boards, they're all focusing on reducing and using money to stop PM10 emissions. And the logic given by CPCB was, if you are reducing PM10, which is a bigger molecule, you're automatically reducing PM2.5. This does not hold mathematically. To explain this very simply, if you wear a cloth mask, you will be able to protect yourself from dust because it's PM10, but PM2.5, that will pass through a cloth mask. So if you're only reducing PM10 and not PM2.5, you're still going to die.
Outside the city centres, crop burning or stubble burning is another source of pollution. Farmers set fire to their fields to prepare their land for the next crop cycle.
What we know that during the harvest time, farmers find it easier to just burn it, and it's much more expensive to hire laborers to cut it from the roots. We have the solutions. It's just that the scale of infrastructure that is needed to enable 100% implementation, that's where we are lagging behind.
Since 2015, regulations and fines have been put in place to discourage crop burning. Farmers are incentivized to stop using fires, for example, by harvesting and selling straw instead of burning it.
So these efforts have helped to actually cut down the number of fire incidences, which were at the level of around 80,000 till in 2020. Now they have come down to a level of only around 14,000 in Punjab and Haryana total.
Yet as the fires die down in the countryside, another blaze is lit in the cities. Waste burning. Delhi has 3 colossal landfills. The oldest and the largest, Ghazipur, is home to thousands of people like Muskan. It was also their source of income.
कबाड़ा बीनती थी, ये बीन के ले जाते हैं, तो बेचते हैं, तो वो पैसे देते हैं, उन लोगों से हमारा गुजारा चल जाता है. कबाड़ा बीनना छोड़ दिया, मम्मी आती है, मम्मी घर चलाती है. मेरे को घिन आने लगा है कूड़े से.
Delhi now generates more waste than it can manage. Its landfills are full, becoming a fire hazard. In April 2022, Ghazipur was engulfed in flames when the garbage piles caught fire. It happened again in April 2024. The speculative cause was the combustible methane gas released by decaying waste.
Now, because you don't know what to do with this amount of garbage, which is your landfill that's just sitting there and emitting things, catching fire, it's just problematic, right? So even if you're using waste to energy plant, while it is curbing or reducing your legacy landfill, managing that waste for you, what it is continuing to doing is to exacerbate the air quality problem.
गर्मी के मौसम में बहुत ज़्यादा धुआं होता है, फैल जाते हैं पूरे खत्ते में, कहीं भी जाओ धुआं होते हैं, धुआं आता है, आग वाग भी लग जाता है.
Last October and November, the government recorded a 38% spike in garbage fires.
Any time that you burn waste, that causes extreme emissions of black carbon and 2.5. And there are other toxic emissions of pollutants that are also released. What the policies currently are not able to do is to enforce the ban on burning waste.
Finally, there is industrial activity, which accounts for about a quarter of India's air pollution. Although the country has made a massive push towards renewables, half its power still comes from coal. India's 6th largest thermal plant is situated in Gautam Buddha Nagar district, 48 kilometers outside of Delhi. It generates power for 8 states and 1 union territory. Tarun Shishodia has grown up in the shadow of this plant his entire life.
दादाजी और हम पहले पुश्तैनी गांव हमारा यही रह चुका है यहाँ से. हाँ, बचपन से पहले जब हम छोटे थे तो हमने देखा था. अब सिर्फ जो आप देख रहे हो ये चिमनी एक थी यहाँ पे. उसके बाद फिर जाने दूसरा प्लांट बनाया इन्होंने, फिर एक और तीसरा प्लांट बनाया. बट जो यहाँ के जो लोग हैं ग्रामीण हैं, उनकी कुछ भी ऐसा हेल्थ के को लेके ये कुछ सोच नहीं रहे हैं कि उनको क्या करना चाहिए क्या नहीं चाहिए. सब गाड़ी खड़ी कर दीजिए आप शाम के टाइम यहाँ पे अपने, और सुबह को फिर गाड़ी यहाँ पे देखिएगा, उसके ऊपर लगभग कितना लेयर बताओ, इतनी लेयर राख की आपको चढ़ी मिलेगी. जो खेती करते हैं उन खेतों में भी जो गेहूँ वगैरह जो बोते हैं हम अपना, और जब कटाई होती है उसकी तो नाक के रास्ते या मुँह के रास्ते बिल्कुल ब्लैक से निकलना स्टार्ट हो जाता है हमको. पथरीला पहाड़ नहीं, राख का पहाड़ है. NTPC की जो राख निकलती है कोयले की, ये उसका पहाड़ है. वहाँ से स्टार्ट होकर वहाँ तो पूरा का पूरा पहाड़ राख का है. यहाँ से शहरों में जाएंगे तो शहरों में भी पॉल्यूशन है. भाई जब आदमी को बाहर भी जाके मरना है, यहाँ भी मरना है, तो इससे बढ़िया है कि अपनी ज़मीन पे रह के मरे ना, आदमी करे क्या.
So we have seen quite a massive decline in coal usage in industrial units around Delhi. But there is actually a big dilemma of India, because given the scale of demand for electricity and power that is growing in this country, it's going to be tough to see a very rapid transition away from coal.
So, the causes of India's air pollution are varied and complex. And when it comes to tackling the toxic air, whose responsibility is it? than a decade ago, Dr. Neelam Clare and her team started tracking the health of newborns in Delhi. They monitored over 10,000 babies, cross-referencing the mother's address against pollution data in a 10-kilometre radius.
We found that it is affecting significantly the fetal weight. PM 2.5 particulate material is so small that it can go through the blood from the mother to the fetus. These newborns or these fetuses may have underdeveloped lungs. They may have, the brain may get affected. Their cardiovascular health may get affected. And this may predispose them to a lot of after effects.
According to 2020's State of Global Air report, in India, more than 450 children under the age of 5 die each day of air pollution-related causes. Around 116,000 newborns died less than a month after birth.
Children breathe faster, they take in more air as compared to the adults. Their lungs are yet not very well developed. Their immune system is not very well developed. So they have maximum exposure to the air, poor air. As a responsible citizen, as a doctor who takes care of babies, I'm not handing over a healthy environment for a healthy life, for a healthy start, which is very, very serious.
Yet, India has been confronting its pollution problem for some time. Since the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act was passed in 1981. In 2019, the government committed $1.7 billion over a 5-year span for the National Clean Air Programme, or NCAP. Initially, the NCAP aimed to cut pollution in 42 cities. This was later expanded to 131 cities across India. In 2021, 2 smog towers were installed in Delhi. They function like air purifiers, sucking in surrounding air to filter out particulates. The towers cost $2.5 million each to build, and about $17,000 each month to run. But a report by the Delhi Pollution Control Committee found that the towers only lowered pollution by 17% in a 100-metre radius.
We know that air purification in outdoor situation does not work. When mass and volume of air moving through the city, a smog tower, and at such an expense, I don't think anyone is even looking at it as a solution.
Smog towers are effective if you have the right number for it. Like if I were to put smog towers across all of Delhi, I would need at least 500 to 600 of them. So do the math, 500 to 600 multiplied by 25-30 crores. It's just, when you do cost-benefit analysis, it does not make sense.
Since late 2023, the smog towers have been intermittently shut due to funding issues. When Insight visited, they were not in operation.
So what we have seen is very interesting in India, that if you really look at the way policies, programs and schemes have been crafted for implementation, they have actually taken on a lot of progressive principles, and they have defined the scope of action the way it needs to be done to make an impact. But where we see the big gap is between the policy and implementation.
What then is the implementation gap? One area that critics point to is data collection and analysis. As of November of 2024, the CPCB has 966 monitoring stations across 419 cities and towns. In Delhi, the Ministry of Earth Sciences runs a program called System of Air Quality and Weather Forecasting and Research, which collects pollution data.
तो अभी PM 2.5 की वैल्यू चल रही है सराउंडिंग में हमारे 89 के आसपास, जो 60 to 70 रहती है. एयर क्वालिटी मॉनिटरिंग सिस्टम AQMS स्टेशन है. इसके अंदर क्या होता है, जो डाटा कलेक्ट होता है ये यहाँ से हमारे मेन सर्वर रूम पर जाता है और वहाँ से हमारा डाटा CPCB में कलेक्ट होता है और काफ़ी न्यूज़ चैनल्स में भी जाता है। क्यों? AQI चेक करने के लिए।
What is the quality of monitoring system? How are you, what is the location of your monitoring system? What is the range in which it operates? How many of them exist? Is it manual, is it continuous? These are all factors that go into ultimately answering the question of, are we measuring it? So data on PM 2.5 is being gathered, but it's not being analyzed necessarily.
Even so, there has been a scale back in data monitoring.
One very interesting development that took place in 2022 was a standing order given by the Central Pollution Control Board to all the state pollution control boards that says that no state is allowed to use central government funding or the 15th Finance Commission funding to procure continuous monitoring devices. In fact, all outstanding procurement orders for continuous emissions monitoring devices was cancelled. We do not know what the reason is, only the Government of India will be able to answer it.
CPCB had said that the funds should focus on pollution control measures rather than expensive monitoring equipment. Another critique is that efforts are targeting the wrong pollutants.
From a recent review of the National Clean Air Program, where actually a huge amount of funding has flowed in. But when you actually see where they're putting most of their money and where they're putting their effort, then it's only dust control.
They figured out they do really well on dust parameters, but not necessarily on the lethal parameters. So they started focusing on dust. So yes, they are doing exceedingly well on the curbing of dust, which is PM10. But the one that gives you lung cancer, 2.5, is not being looked at. For every $100 spent on air quality, 67 is spent on dust reduction.
And then there is a question of whether focusing on cities under the NCAP is sufficient, as sources of pollution may lie outside their boundaries.
For an implementation strategy from practical point of view, if you allot funds or you focus on a city or a state level, it becomes easier. But of late, it is very clear that we have to change our approach from city and emission-centric to airshed-centric.
An airshed refers to a geographical location that shares the same air. In India, this area could span several states.
Airshed-centric approach is the approach which does not see the state or district boundaries. So what does it mean? That you need to work together along with many state governments together with this, and that is the reason this has to go on.
But when it comes to pollution, there is finger-pointing. When Delhi's then Chief Minister Atishi was asked about the air pollution last November, she pointed fingers at other states' economic activities like power generation and crop burning. She also blamed the central government for lack of action. Chief Minister Atishi is from the Aam Aadmi Party, or AAP, part of the opposition to the ruling BJP party. In turn, BJP leaders have pinned the pollution on the AAP.
In a political composition, if there are two different governments of a two different ideology or a parties, obviously it becomes very difficult to coordinate or which is not happening. And that is where the problem is. The moment it becomes a state problem, district problem, corporation problem, this mohalla problem versus this mohalla problem, then always, competition starts and so many things.
So it is a stick that everyone is trying to avoid. It's like kindergartners trying to avoid getting caned, each one pointing fingers at the other. Collective action here stems from realizing that the collective good is not just a healthier planet, not just healthier people, but a healthier economy.
So in 2021, the Commission for Air Quality Management in the National Capital Region and adjoining areas was put together to coordinate efforts across territories. Apart from Delhi, the CAQM has jurisdiction over surrounding states of Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh.
It's not only Delhi could impact others, others could impact Delhi, so it's also important to address the issues in adjoining areas. The CAQM works in active and collaborative approach with all the state governments. For each sector, wherever required, we have come up with a roadmap as governed by the policy and then specific directions as to who should do what by when. For the implementation part and enforcement part of it, it's through the state governments, the pollution control boards or the pollution control committees.
When the air quality worsened last October, the Supreme Court chastised the CAQM for failing to enforce its own directives. The court noted that there had been no prosecution of stubble burning violations since August.
To be very candid, in 2021 it was very difficult because it's a multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder kind of a issue. So getting all those issues together, getting all those people together will be an onerous task. It's definitely a long journey, but with confidence we can say that at least our policies, our directions are in place and we can and we have moved a bit and it's the right direction, I believe.
While progress on the issue creeps along, some parents are left with some difficult choices.
बहुत से डॉक्टरों से भी मिला तो उन्होंने यही बोला कि अगर यहाँ से मतलब कि पोल्यूशन से बचना चाहते हो तो अदर स्टेट में चले जाओ.
छोड़ना तो चाहते हैं लेकिन गांव में गुजारा भी नहीं है बिना काम के.
गांव में तो बिल्कुल ही नहीं है.
वहाँ तो बिल्कुल ही पिटा पड़ा है.
What will it take for India to solve its air pollution problem? Or is the toxic atmosphere here to stay? Every day for 15 hours, Fahimuddin has to brave the smog to tend to his roadside fruit stall.
दिल्ली इसलिए आए, काम वहाँ गांव में है नहीं. गांव में काम होता तो इधर आते ही क्यों. ये तो टाइम पास करना पड़ता है मैम, हाँ पैसे के चक्कर में. हाँ नहीं तो गांव से बढ़िया हिसाब हो रही है.
The health impact of air pollution in India is getting aggravated, one, because it is affecting everyone, but more because you still have poor people. Clearly, they are not causing the pollution, but they are the victims of the pollution.
Some estimates say Delhi has between 300,000 to 400,000 homeless. A few of the more fortunate ones find a space in homeless shelters like the one at Sarai Kale Khan. Many thousands of others are left exposed to the elements.
वहाँ की झुग्गी सारी टूट गई है. रहने के लिए ठिकाना नहीं था तो फिर यहाँ फिर हम आ गए रेन बसेरे. हमारे 3 बच्चे हैं. उनके भविष्य के लिए ये सोचते हैं कि उन्हें अच्छा रहे. जैसे हम लोग भटक रहे हैं इधर उधर, उन्हें ये काम ना करना पड़े.
The poorer you are, you're breathing more unclean air, whether it's from indoor air pollution or outdoor air pollution, their public health costs become higher. As a relative share of their incomes, that is a higher burden. And therefore, solving for air is a sustainable development issue rather than just a narrow city-specific environmental issue.
But for other segments of society, air pollution also takes an economic toll.
Clean air is directly proportional to productivity in India. So if I'm the government and I know that I employ say 10 people, if my air is so severe that out of the 10 people, I have say 5 suffering from asthma, their kids are suffering or their spouses are suffering, and we know that people are taking more and more days off. If I am a company investing in India and I know that my labor is not going to be able to show up to work, it is a net loss for me.
We want to be an open economy, we want to attract foreign investment. Clearly, we must be losing foreign investment with polluted cities. So once we start quantifying this, then we realize that actually investing in clean air not just cleans up the air, not just cleans up the city, but begins to clean up the economy, creates new business opportunities, attracts talent, attracts investment.
According to Swiss company IQ Air, 83 of the world's 100 most polluted cities are in India.
The entire country is grappling with this. Delhi happens to be in the news because this is the power capital of the country, the political corridors are here, but this is certainly a problem all over the country.
So some scientists are urging the central government to take an airshed, holistic approach to air quality management rather than the current city or state-centric methods.
Airshed approach, it does not see any political dispensation, it doesn't see any state boundary, in fact it doesn't see even international boundaries also. Giving you the one example, the Delhi airshed is not confined to Delhi. It aids up the areas from 7 different states surrounding them. So the mitigation measures which is being taken within the wall of Delhi metropolitan territory, that will not yield as much faster results as if the similar kind of a measure would have taken in a complete airshed.
Across India's border, its neighbour has seen success with the airshed approach. In 2013, China tackled its toxic air with its Air Pollution Action Plan. It coordinated efforts nationwide, closing old coal plants and transitioning to natural gas or renewables. It shut down or moved polluting industries and undertook large-scale reforestation programs. So between 2013 and 2022, particulate pollution in China was reduced by over 40%. Can India achieve the same?
In fact, if you see the original National Clean Air Program targets, which were 20 to 35% reduction of air pollution, that was actually taken from the blueprint of what Beijing was able to do, what Seoul was able to do. What Beijing was able to do, for example, was to have an extremely stringent mechanism of enforcement. They were very clear on what we are measuring, how we are measuring it, how do we want to reduce it, who is going to enforce it. We lack across all those steps.
We as a scientist can always say that these are the airshed, this is the way, this is the solution. But how it gets into the implementation and management, this is leaving to the executives.
Perhaps what is missing is the political push from the people. After all, during India's general election in mid-2024, the campaigns centred around issues like unemployment, cost of living, welfare and religion. Pollution hardly featured.
We still need a democratic demand for clean air. And I think this goes back to the core of the issue here, that we as citizens haven't internalized. Bad air is not something that you become immune to. This is not a virus that you're building up some immunity against. This is a toxin.
By January, life seems to have returned to normal in Delhi. Though the air quality remained between 200 to 400, poor to very poor, many were out and about without masks.
I'm not wearing a mask because I find it a little inconvenient, and I've got probably used to the pollution, and when I leave the house it doesn't strike me. Ignorance is bliss sometimes.
Pollution तो concerning है, मतलब concerning तो ये बहुत है, लेकिन वही है काफ़ी सारे लोगों को नहीं पता है, तो इसकी वजह से ये एक बड़ा इशू नहीं बन पाता है.
और जिस देश में रोटी, कपड़ा, मकान इस जैसे प्रॉब्लम ही सॉल्व नहीं हो पा रहे, वो देश के लोग पोल्यूशन के बारे में तो बाद में सोचेंगे ना, वो वाली बात है.
So people right now are not able to understand the consequences of poor quality air. Citizens feel that it's only a short-term problem, not a long-term problem, and that's why I'm highlighting the fact that we need to look at it as a long-term problem.
I don't think political will is a variable or a constant that emerges out of nowhere. The day we recognize that in the world's fastest growing major economy, air pollution is holding us back from growing faster, is when we will realize that investing in clean air is one of the best investments we can make for our economic development.
By the 6th of February, Delhi's air quality improved to 180. Schools have reopened and most or all restrictions lifted. As the pollution dissipates, will this winter's bad air be the impetus for change, or will it be forgotten until it returns at the end of 2025?
This obviously has attracted attention of all policymakers and implementers. The initial momentum has been actually overcome. Now things are actually on the move.
I'm a die-hard optimist, and I have no reason to believe that India will not be able to build the clean pathways in the future.
As the knowledge are increasing, more combination, more harmonization, interaction of a scientific fraternity with policymakers to the implementers, I see that down the line, at least in a decade, we should be able to see our cities are getting cleaner, mortality, morbidity are declining.
When I'm talking to you, who's coming in front of my eyes? It is my grandson who's just 3 months old. That what kind of future I'm giving to Avi. Because we need to give a good future to our children, and we have to do something about our environment. Whether it is a joint responsibility, it's responsibility of me, you, the policymakers, the media, everybody.